Okay, this is Orlando Wilson. What I'm going to talk about in this video slash podcast is a question or a topic I'm asked about quite often, which is private military companies. The last person to mention this to me was asking about how one could be set up, etc. They're interested, they're new to the business, they want to just exploring things. But I get asked quite often by people, have I heard of certain companies? Are they worth working for? New companies popped out, they're looking for people, they say they're a PMC. Are they credible, etc.? I would say, and as I said to most people, 99.9% of the people saying they're PMCs, they're self-proclaimed. The best they'll ever do is be armed security guards somewhere. That's it. The whole PMC thing is fashionable on social media, but in reality, most of it is complete and utter fantasy. And in this video, podcast, I'm going to explain a few little points. It's going to be a little bit of a long one because this is a pretty detailed topic for myself, because I've been bumping into this type of stuff for almost 30 years now. So today we're going to talk about private military companies. Now, this type of thing's been around forever. They say the second oldest profession after prostitution. The heyday, what everybody thinks of mercenaries these days, was in Africa during the 1960s, in the Congo, in Biafra, etc. People could, in those days, the world was a lot bigger place, go around and overthrow other people's countries and get into all sorts of trouble without too many people knowing about it. These days, you got to remember, we live in a digital age, and you can't really do much because you're always on record. Passports, cell phones, people know where you are at all times, people know what you're doing at all times. Even communications, if you're communicating with people, there's a record, people know what you're talking about. So all the dare doing that used to be done in the 1960s and maybe 70s in Angola, you're not going to do that type of stuff these days. Why? Because people will be on you. Governments and authorities will be on you for doing anything illegal straight away. And legalities has got a big part to do with the security business in general, and also private military companies, because as I'll explain, a lot of what people claim to be doing and claim to want to do is illegal. And these days, you have to be a good boy. If not, you end up in jail. So that's something you need to consider when you're considering overseas adventures or going and overthrowing a country somewhere because somebody you met in a pub said it's a good idea and you'll make lots of money from it. Okay, let me check my notes. So again, to me, I think we can define this, the difference between private military companies, mercenaries, and security guards is the mercenaries are offensive. They'll go out and take offensive action. They can go out and mess people up, screw up people, overtake countries. They do what the military does, which is offensive actions. The companies providing security, be it in Iraq, be it in Afghanistan, and these are the ones everybody thinks about these days because they've seen all the cool pictures online, and in the day people made money. In the day it was a dangerous job. But again, these people that's been working in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places as armed security are armed security guards. They are not taking offensive actions. Yes, they're in a hostile environment, but they're armed security guards. That's it. That might be sexy for people like coming out of UK or wherever, where they can't have guns, or Western Europe, where they get to have a gun and provide security. But I say to people, it's like I know people working in the hood in South Florida and parts of the hood in South Florida, providing security on, be it gas stations and mini markets, which on a daily basis, if you ask me, are putting their lives at a lot more risk than a lot of the security contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan. I would sooner be in Iraq and Afghanistan than dealing in the hood in a lot of inner cities in the United States, because to me that's a lot more unpredictable and a lot more dangerous environment. So I hope that puts it in perspective. If you don't think you think what I'm talking about is BS, go check the crime statistics on, say, South Chicago, and things might surprise you a little bit. Now, offensive action. The only private military companies that are out there that's taking offensive action at the moment that comes to mind is Wagner. Wagner is taking offensive action. Wagner is a private military company. How do they do it? They have permission from the Russian government. They work closely with the Russian government. They are an offshoot of the Russian government. They take offensive actions. They take the initiative. The other company that really started all this was Executive Outcomes. And again, Executive Outcomes done excellent work. They're in Angola, Sierra Leone, everybody knows about. But the company founder, Eben Barlow, and he's got books out there, etc. I recommend if you're interested in this type of thing, get his books, read them, because he is an authority on the subject, top. He was also involved in, I think his new company is called Step or something. They were also involved in Nigeria, northern Nigeria, and they went and they done the job. They got things done. Very professional. And I'll talk about that in a second. So generally, there's not many companies out there that take aggressive action, that take offensive action. Even companies like Blackwater, when they provided security. They provided security, they provided contractors to the US government. Maybe some of their guys working for CIA took offensive action, but generally they're behind the scenes advising, training, etc. For legal reasons, for liability reasons, they're not in the front line taking offensive actions. And to sum it up, they're not out there shooting people, getting involved in firefights and killing bad guys. Why? Because the legal justifications, especially from a US point of view, are vast. Okay, so I hope that explains the difference between private military companies and security guard companies, armed security guard companies, armed international security guard companies, if people are lucky enough to get those armed international security guard positions. Now, the issue is what's killed off a lot of the, that we say, private contractor work is that governments supply their own training teams, provide their own people to foreign governments. The UK, NATO, US, etc. They have training teams everywhere working with different governments. One example I'll use is Iraq and the Kurds. The Kurdistan got some autonomy from Iraq, and there's been a lot of NATO, whatever you call it, NATO coalition, US forces there training Kurdish forces. Is the standard of the training high? Definitely not. It's bad. But you know what? The Kurds are happy with NATO training their people. Why? Because it's free. They most probably get free equipment, free this, free that. Rather than going out and hiring people that actually know what they're doing, that can provide them with professional training, people generally take the free option. And a lot of countries think that the fact it's coming from, say, the British government, they're going to get top training, which they don't. You can see now a lot of African countries are pulling away from foreign training teams. I think you've seen this in Mali, Burkina Faso. They've just asked the French, both countries have asked the French to leave, and they brought in Wagner. Why? Because PMCs get things done. That's been seen with executive outcomes. If somebody's hiring a private company, they're hiring them to solve a problem, where we can see from the Western mentality of warfare these days, they're not there to solve problems, they're there to extend problems, they're there to promote their country's interests. A lot of countries, if they have a problem, they want to bring in military personnel that's going to act, well, advisors and possibly troops that's going to end the problem. And I'd say I spent a little bit of time in Africa. From the African mentality, they want it done quickly and as efficiently as possible. They don't want NATO troops coming in, etc., lecturing them on gender issues and pronouns and everything else. They want people to go out and kill the bad guys or train them how to kill the bad guys. They're not too worried about the pronouns of the bad guys they're killing. So this is where I see professional private military companies as being a positive. It's just the legalities of people setting up and legalities of employing a private military company can be very, very, very complicated. Now, one thing These days, these volunteers, I'm sure everybody's seen it with Ukraine. There's how many foreigners there volunteering. They're volunteering to work with, to be with some of the militias, to be with the Ukrainian army. Okay, I've always said, okay, volunteers have been around forever. But to me, this is a business. How much are those volunteers getting paid? Next to nothing. If they get shot, who's paying their medical bills? If they get their legs blown off, who's repatriating them? Who's going to be paying their welfare and everything else for the rest of their lives? Nobody. If somebody had his leg blown off and they're working with a regular military, or their military, their own military, then they're going to be taken care of to some extent. If you're out there volunteering and you get hurt, generally you're on your own. I know of cases in some places where people have been hurt on front lines and they've had to pay for the ambulances to take them to the rear, then pay for their medical treatment, etc. Because the people they were working for didn't particularly care about them. They're cannon fodder. They're foreigners. So use them, abuse them, that's it. Now, one of the issues with a lot of volunteers, and this was seen, and I'll use Ukraine as an example because it's high profile in the news, a lot of the people turning up to fight had no experience, were dreamers, and generally not military materials. All the crazy people were turning up. In Iraq, in Syria, the YPG had the same problem, but they had an extensive vetting process of who they actually said, yes, turn up, and who they actually said, yes, you can fight with us. They didn't want wackos. The Peshmerga had a ton of people turn up that were not suitable for anything. Wackos, crazy people that wanted to turn up, have some pictures taken, look tactical, then go back to wherever they come from and try and go write a book and try and get a movie deal, etc., etc. I think with Peshmerga, they also had some sex offenders turn up, etc. Big stink. People trying to run away from reality and live the life of a mercenary on $40 a month or something, right? It's funny mentioning Iraq. I know when the offensive in Mosul happened, I think the Iraqi forces come out and said, we don't want volunteers. They didn't want them anywhere near there, especially Hashishabi. They were like, don't want them. Why? We don't know who they are. Again, we don't know if they're trained. They're not going to be coordinated with us. The chances are they're not going to speak Arabic. And they don't know if they're spies or not. They don't know if they're working for ISIS, etc. So again, this is another thing with volunteers turning up in places. Nobody knows who they are. Don't know the training. Don't know if they're credible. Don't know if they're criminals, psychopaths. And you don't know if they're working for the opposition. I take it knowing the little I know about Hashishabi, if volunteers started turning up asking to fight for them, and they was in any way questionable, they've been taken around the back of a building somewhere, shot and looted. That's it. That's the reality of the PMC business if you want to play big boy. Life is very, very cheap. Now, people say about the French Foreign Legion. Yes, the French Foreign Legion is in theory a mercenary force, but it's part of the French army. It's the same as the British employing Gurkhas. The Sultan of Brunei, I think, has got Gurkhas. They're working for an official army, the British Army, the French Army, and even UAE hired, they hired Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, to hire a lot of Latin Americans to work in UAE. I think at one point, from what I understand, the UAE had a battalion of Latin Americans stationed in the desert somewhere, ready in case they needed them. UAE has used, and Saudi Arabia has used mercenaries in the war in Yemen. There was a lot of Latin Americans killed in Yemen. I think Saudi went on to recruit Sudanese. There was a lot of Sudanese fighting for the Saudis. But again, these guys are working for a government. They're not just turning up as a company and getting hired by whoever. They're working officially for a government on government contracts. So that's your volunteers. Now, in a lot of countries, there's laws against people joining foreign armies. Officially, US citizens, as far as I know, unless the law's changed, US citizens cannot serve in a foreign military. If they serve in a foreign military, they can lose their citizenship. I understand Austria is another country. You cannot serve in a foreign military. You're going to have big problems. I think after the issues with executive outcomes in South Africa, and executive outcomes was doing very good work, the South Africans brought in a law against private military companies and also South Africans serving in foreign militaries. So this is where, from a legal perspective, the fact you serve in a foreign army or in a foreign military could get yourself into trouble, especially if that military you're serving with has issues with your own government, because then you can be an enemy of your own country or classed as a terrorist and charged under terrorist offenses, etc. Okay. Now, other examples of where mercenary adventures have gone bad. And you got to remember, if you're thinking of going and overthrowing a country or doing anything stupid, it's illegal. The days of the 1960s where people could go around, hijack planes and do all the crazy stuff, it's over. You hijack a plane these days, it doesn't matter. I think it doesn't matter what side you're on. That's illegal in some countries. That's illegal, period, due to international laws. But you can be charged as soon as you land that plane. In a lot of places, you're going to be charged, period. So you can't go doing the crazy stuff. If you look what happened I'll throw out a couple of examples that just came to mind. Equatorial Guinea. That was an adventure that went extremely bad there. British and South African troops went in. Well, they didn't even get there. It was all arrested in Zimbabwe. Everybody went to jail. And the people behind that escapade, I think, were Margaret Thatcher, the former former Prime Minister of England. Margaret Thatcher's son was involved in that. And so was a couple of his Eton friends. So if Eton boys can go and plan an adventure and it all goes bad and everybody gets thrown in jail, you, without the Eton contacts, aren't going to be doing too good, if that makes sense. Because again, they've got the contacts should have the contacts to get stuff done and also keep them out of jail. But in most places, if you say you went to Eton, it's a get out of jail free card, but not in Africa. Africa did different perspectives. So the Eton boys come unstuck in Equatorial Guinea. I think they were arrested in the South Africans, and a couple of Brits was arrested in Zimbabwe. They'd done a jail term in Zimbabwe. Then they was extradited to Equatorial Guinea and done a jail term in Equatorial Guinea. So again, they were there to overthrow the country. Everybody just ended up busted before anything started and thrown in jail. A couple of years ago, I think 2019, some Americans were planning to overthrow the government in Venezuela. And everybody heard what was going on before it happened. They just tried to go ashore, shoot the place up, and some crazy adventure. I think everybody ended up being arrested and everybody ended up being thrown in jail, and they're still in Venezuelan jail. It was an embarrassment because everybody was saying they're US spies, they're Trump's people, etc., etc. They weren't. They were a security guard company out of the US that ended up making some contacts in Miami, who went to Colombia, done some security guard work in Colombia, talked BS with how many people, barroom BS, heard some stories, got given a little bit of money, and then decided to go on an adventure and try and overthrow the Venezuelan government. And it didn't work. As I said, everybody was arrested. I don't think any of the Americans were killed, but they're sat in a Venezuelan jail now. So you can't go around doing stupid things. Another one out of Miami, Haiti, Miami security company, contract in Haiti. And this is a couple of years ago, I think it's still ongoing cases. These guys went in and killed the president of Haiti. They were, I believe, Colombians working for this. I understand, I could be wrong on this, a Miami-related company, promised a big paying contract, go do this, go do that. Crazy story, crazy job. They just went in, bluffed their way in, killed the president. And after that, they all got arrested. They all ended up in jail. There was no follow-up. So I think all they planned to do was to kill the president. There was no backup. Should have been a coup, but there was no coup. Nobody backed them up. Nobody supported them. So they all ended up getting busted and thrown in jail. Stupidity. The other one I got here, how many years? Almost 10 years ago, if not more now. I think a guy from Norway and the Netherlands, there was a British connection there somehow. One of them could have dual citizenship, were arrested in the Congo. They went into the Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, to do their mercenary thing. And they ended up getting into an argument with somebody and killing somebody local. They both died in jail. Why? In a lot of these countries, even though the media might portray them as being lawless, there are laws there. It makes me laugh. You see people on the movies when they're going into places like Nigeria running around with guns. Nigeria is very, very restrictive on firearms. The laws are very, very strict. There is a legal system. And again, these guys, they killed somebody in the Congo. Of course, they was arrested. They weren't hard to find because I take it they was the only white guys in a large, the only white guys around, to put it politely. They were quickly found, quickly arrested, charged, thrown in jail. Both died in jail, as far as I know. So again, this is where what I'm trying to get at is you cannot go around doing stupid things. Wherever you go, you have to work within the legal system. You're not going to go and overthrow a country these days. If you're providing security services, you have to know who you're providing those services for. If you're working for government, then you have to ensure the services you're providing are legal 150%. It could be legal for that government, but if you go back to your own country, you could be slammed with terrorism charges. So the legalities and PMCs is a big, big area you have to look into. And these days, you look at most of the legalities and everything screams PMCs are illegal. What people dream of being PMC operations are illegal. Another one for you guys to look, guys and girls to look up is ITAR. ITAR is the International Arms Trafficking Regulations, etc. This was brought in after, that's probably wrong on this, after 9/11, etc. It's a US law, it's a US regulation that regulates the arms industry, including training. So you have to be very careful if you're a US citizen or US person that you're not in violation of ITAR when you're doing anything to do with even training, that's tactical training, firearms training, or especially if you're providing equipment. Equipment sales out of the US are extremely complicated these days because of ITAR. You're selling equipment without being ITAR registered, or you sell it to the wrong person, you're going to have big legal problems. So if you're thinking about getting into the international security business, period, or in firearms business, period, look up ITAR. And if you're a US company or person, you're involved in this world, that world, you need to be ITAR registered, or you have to be very, very careful. Even down to the fact the National Rifle Association stopped foreign citizens or stopped foreigners. They only issued, I think now, certifications to US citizens or residents because of ITAR. The laws are written that vague. You have to be extremely careful. And people write laws very, very vaguely because it gives the authorities more scope if they want to charge somebody. Okay. Now, from a UK perspective, and these are the laws I know. I'm sure if you look into your country, you need to look at the laws on what you can and cannot do and what laws you fall under, because every country is different. From a UK perspective, at a base level, if you're a UK citizen, if you kill somebody anywhere in the world, you can be investigated under British law, even if it's a justifiable shooting, justifiable killing, etc. You can be investigated by the British police under UK law. This is some law, I think, going back to the 13th century or something crazy. I remember years ago there was a case. I think the guy was a cop in UK or something, former cop. Years and years ago, when he was a teenager, he killed somebody in, I think, Guyana, somewhere in Latin America. He killed the person. He fled to UK, started a whole different life in UK. The family of the person he killed in Guyana traced him to UK in the end, found out who he was, and they filed a complaint against him with the British police. He was investigated and charged and convicted with that murder under UK law. So if you're a UK citizen, you get into trouble anywhere in the world, or you're considering doing anything stupid anywhere in the world, you can still be liable and arrested under UK law. Now, even as far as stuff like the arms dealing and selling weapons and selling military equipment, you have to be extremely careful. One of the magazines I write for is the Circuit magazine. So look it up, and there's an article, I think they got it online, called Accidental, you might be Accidental Arms Dealer or something. Look up that article because it details how if you are even providing training courses and you give away certain equipment under UK, that could be a violation of UK customs laws, etc., because you're actually dealing in arms, etc. So look up the Circuit magazine, look up the article, I think it's Accidental Arms Dealer, and that will detail a little bit about UK law. I said, if you're thinking about international security work, you need to understand the laws, the rules, and the regulations. If not, you're going to get yourself into too much trouble to start with and make yourself look too stupid to start with. If you're going and you're talking to people, professionals, they're going to understand the laws. And if you don't understand them, you're just going to be another Walter Mitty, whatever your background is. Yeah, you're just another BSer looking to make a quick buck, or just another kid living in fantasy world. And again, I've come across plenty of these people who served a lot of time in their own militaries, and they go off and try and do all this stuff, and just sitting down talking to them, they might be experienced from their service in their own militaries, but in the international world, the close protection world, the firearms world, they're absolutely clueless. There's another documentary online which is good, and again, if you're serious, take the time to look it up. It's on YouTube, and it's called The Fighter Pilot, the Mercenary Boss, and the Warlord. It's about something that happened in Libya, and this talks about something, I think Eric Prince was behind it, where they was going to go in and work for, I think, Haifa in Libya, and the job all collapsed. It all went bad. And the interesting part about that documentary, it details about ITAR and the things you can and cannot do. And it talks about how Eric Prince, I've heard this from multiple angles, he's violated US laws and a lot of laws by the stuff he does. Well, the thing is with Eric Prince is very well connected. I know people that's bumped into him, they reckon he's a very decent guy. But due to the stuff he does, it's questionable. And he could be pulled under a lot of US laws, but he's an asset of the US, I'm sure. And again, he's very, very politically connected. He knows a lot of people. To sum it up, you're not Eric Prince. You don't know the people he knows. If you done a fraction of the things he done, and possibly trying to put this politely, or put it so it's not offensive to anyone. If you done half the things he done and stirred up as much trouble as he has, a lot of people wouldn't look at you so kindly as they look at him, because he has the contacts. You don't have the contacts. You'll be going to jail, if that makes sense. Okay, so again, a lot of the PMC stuff, hopefully you're seeing at this stage, it is a professional business if people want to get into even the international armed security business, even the security business. If you're trying to get into the security business, you have to be licensed, etc., etc. If you're dealing with weapons, everybody has to be trained. Everybody has to be licensed. It's not just getting a bunch of guys together and saying, okay, we're going to set up a PMC. I remember there were some idiots on the TV when I was in South Florida but I think something was going on somewhere and they were going off to fight. And I think it was when the ISIS thing started in Iraq. They were on the TV, how they were going to go off to fight and whatever. And it's just a bunch of bozos at a local gun range, dressed up in tactical gear, doing some drills for the local media. Somebody most probably called up the media and said, oh, we're going to go off to Iraq to fight ISIS. And you had just a bunch of goons running around in tactical gear, shooting things up, calling themselves a PMC. It was their 15 minutes of fame. You know what? That's most PMCs. It's a bunch of guys, well, in the US, a bunch of guys that get some tactical gear, go to the gun range and call themselves a PMC. I'm saying that's the US because people have access to guns. In Europe, it's just the guys dressing up in tactical gear and maybe having some airsoft guns, calling themselves a PMC. That's it. Hoping to get security guard work. You got to think about it from a logistical point of view. If you're a PMC, where are you going to get your weapons from? Where are you going to get the equipment from? How much is that going to cost? How much is night vision? How much is thermal these days? Drones, etc. Decent quality stuff. It all costs money. So if you're setting up your own PMC with how many people, 10 guys, you need, I hope you got like $100,000 in cash just for the equipment. And then you need the licenses and permits for the equipment. You got to remember, we'll put it this way, under ITAR, exporting even night vision, you need an export permit. You can take it out for personal use. But again, if you turn up the airport with 10 night vision scopes, etc., trying to take them out of the country, I'm sure customs will be talking to you to start with. If you were trying to take that stuff into a lot of countries, you'll be looked at very questionably to start with, if not arrested. In some countries, taking in anything that's military, anything that's to do with a weapon, even cleaning kit, is illegal. I know of one person that got into trouble taking in a cleaning kit into a certain Middle Eastern country, a weapons cleaning kit. When he declared what it was, a big stink, etc. Were they being shaken down? Most probably, but they ended up in trouble. This is where you cannot go flying around the world with bags full of military equipment. And again, as I said, the legalities of taking some military equipment out of your country, military grade equipment, again, is illegal. So you need export permits, etc. A lot of the high-end, the proper military equipment, you need end-user certificates to buy in the first place, especially communications equipment. So again, there's a big difference between what people put on social media and the realities. So this is where a lot of people, especially on social media these days, like to dress themselves up, set up the website, set up the Facebook page, set up the Instagram page and call themselves a PMC. Put some videos of them doing firearms drills, crap firearms drills for the most, very basic firearms drills on some range somewhere, dressed up in their 511 gear and their plate carriers, and tell people they're going to go around and do PMC work. It's complete and utter BS. I've had people, again, as I said to start with, approach me saying, have you heard of this PMC company? They say they're doing this, they say they're doing that. Most of these gigs people talk about, most of these jobs, is just BS. They meet somebody that talks BS, they believe the BS. If it comes down to doing serious, what would be classed as PMC work, you have to be working for a government. And that is a very, very closed world. You might get, if you're very lucky, if you're moving in the right circles, you might get a sniff of something. But it's generally government to government. You have to be hired by a government. And again, this is PMC work. Even as far as the training side is concerned. Being hired to do offensive actions or whatever, due to liability, due to legal reasons, etc., doesn't happen. Very, very rarely. As I said in the beginning, people like Wagner's doing it because they have approval. They're a big company with a lot of contacts. You setting up a small company hoping to do that type of thing legally, dream on. If you're lucky, at best, you might get some government training work, or you might get some armed security work for a government agency. So this is where, and again, I know people that's talked about this type of thing, like the Venezuelan job, the Haiti job, etc. I heard of that stuff over the years. I dismiss it, period, because again, those guys are in jail. And such schemes and such plans and such wild ideas, generally people are talking BS, and if they do ever get off the ground, generally there's not going to be enough money. The money doesn't turn up, or it's just everything collapses as those jobs did, and everybody ends up in jail. And again, they should end up in jail because what they was doing was illegal. If anybody ever approaches you, if you set up a company and people approach you for that type of thing, I would generally dismiss it. Why? Because from my perspective, I've heard and seen quite a few crazy things over the years. And again, generally they don't pan out. Generally the money doesn't turn up. Generally the logistics doesn't turn up. And generally everything, if you look at it from a legal perspective, is illegal. Even if it works, if it does work, I hope that if you do get it and it does work, the chances of you returning to your own country again, or not having a restaurant, chances of you being able to return to your own country again would be very slim, without being charged as soon as you get off the plane. if your passport isn't cancelled to start with. Or if it does go right or does go wrong, you end up working for the wrong people, you can be charged under terrorism offenses, etc. So these days in the international security business, you have to be extremely careful with what you're doing. You have to understand the laws. And again, the PMC stuff, as I said, hopefully you can see from this, a lot of it is complete Walter Mitty BS. It doesn't happen. It's people talking about stuff on social media, dreaming of doing what they've seen in the movies and on TV, etc. That's your PMC world. People should keep it clear and call it armed security work, which is most of what the PMCs, or supposed PMCs, do. They provide armed security work if they're lucky. Are they going to ever go and overthrow a country? No, they're dreaming. Are they ever going to go and do Wagner type operations? Unless they're called Wagner, I doubt it very much. Because in the West these days, the rules and regulations are on top of people. The rules and regulations are there to stop people doing that type of thing. And if you try to start doing that type of thing, especially if it's got anything that clashes with your government or a friendly government, just you talking about it and maybe even trying to make the first steps to do it, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. As I said, terrorist offenses. So bear that in mind. So I hope this podcast video has been a little bit informative, has made you think about a few things. If you're interested in PMCs or considering PMC work, you've seen an article online telling people how cool it is, telling you how cool it is. I would say be very, very careful. Don't believe what you're told, and always check things out from a legal perspective before you do anything. Ensure the people you're dealing with are genuine, and ensure if you do go on any wild escapades, you're paid, and you're just not going to end up going somewhere doing something stupid and being hung out to dry and spending a lot of time in a foreign prison. So, as I said, I hope this has made you think about a few things. I have a lot more videos going up online and podcasts. So follow me along on social media for more content on international security, close protection, kidnap and ransom, etc. We've got the podcast channel up now. We're up on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. If you're connected with me on social media, please feel free to reach out if you've got any relevant questions or any topics you'd like me to talk about. In the meantime, check out the other videos we've got up online, the other podcasts, and also I have an array of books up online on Amazon to do with various aspects of the security business, close protection, kidnap and ransom, etc. And you check out our blogs, my blog, Truth Only Has a Few Friends, and also the Risk Incorporated blog. We got a lot of content up there as well that can answer some of your questions. In the meantime, be good, stay safe, stay out of trouble. And if people offer you exciting and interesting work overseas, I take it with a big pinch of salt. Do your due diligence, and also ensure everything you're doing is legal, because you don't want to end up being arrested and thrown in jail. But that might be a lot better off than going on some crazy adventure and being chopped up into little pieces over a period of weeks. So I hope this gives you a few things to think about.